a lot about my daughter. And my daughter was very ill when she was a kid, but particularly when she was a teenager. She had a very terrible time of it. She had juvenile rheumatoid arthritis, and when she was between the ages of 14 and 16, it first destroyed her hip, which had to be replaced, and then it destroyed the ankle on her other leg, which had to be replaced. And she walked around for 2 years on broken legs, and she was taking massive doses of opiates and could hardly stay awake, and she had this advanced autoimmune disease, which produced all sorts of other symptoms that were just as bad as the joint degeneration, but which are harder to describe. And so it's just bloody brutal. And as a test of your faith, there's almost nothing that's more direct than a serious illness inflicted upon an innocent child, right? And so the chapter's a meditation on that, and also on, well, what to do in a situation like that, because everyone is going to have a situation like that in some sense, because you'll be faced with illness in the people that you love and in crisis. And so it's a practical guide to coping with those sorts of things. And one of the things you do when you're overwhelmed by crisis is you shorten your time frame. It's like you can't think about next month. Maybe you can't even bloody well think about next week, or maybe not even tomorrow. Because now is just so overwhelming that that's all there is. It's like, and that's what you do. You cut your time frame back until you can cope with it. And if it's not the next week that you see how to get through, then it's the next day. And if it's not the next day, then it's the next hour. And if it's not the next hour, then it's the next minute. And people are very, 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 very tough. And it turns out that if you face things that you can put up with a lot more than you think you can put up with, and you can do it without becoming corrupted. And she did recover quite fully, and much as a consequence of her own machinations, because she figured out what was wrong with her and then took the necessary steps to fix it, which is nothing short of a bloody miracle as far as I'm concerned. And anyways, part of the cat bit is, I actually start by talking about our dog, who actually died about a year ago, but he's still alive in the book. I let people know, because dog lovers love dogs, and if you love cats, then they think you don't like dogs, and then they don't like you. So I also point out at the beginning of the chapter that, if you want to pet a dog on the street, that's okay too, so you don't have to get up in arms about it. But the idea is that, you have to be alert when you're suffering. You have to be alert to the beauty in life, the unexpected beauty in life. And that's kind of what I was trying to get across with the idea of the cat. There's this cat that lives across the street from us called Ginger, and Ginger's a Siamese cat. And cats really aren't domesticated, technically speaking. They're still wild animals, but they kind of like people. God only knows why, but they do, And so Ginger will come wandering over, and our dog looks at her, but they're friends, and she rolls over on his back, and Seiko used to, nose her a bit, and then she'd kind of mosey over and let you pet her if she was feeling like it that day. And you have to look for those little bit of sparkling crystal in the darkness when things are bad. You have to look and see where things are still beautiful and where there's still something that's sustaining. And you narrow your time frame, and you be grateful for what you have, and that can get you through some very dark times, and maybe even successfully if you're lucky. But even if unsuccessfully, then maybe it's only tragic and not absolute hell. And you can do that, in the worst situation. You can make it only tragic and not hell. And there's a big gap between tragedy and hell. There's nothing worse at a deathbed than to see the people there fighting. The death is bad enough, but you can take that, as terrible as it is, and make it into something that's absolutely unbearable. And maybe, I think, and this is sort of what I closed the book with, is this idea is that if we didn't all attempt to make terrible things even worse than they are, then maybe we could tolerate the terrible things that we have to put up with in order to exist. And maybe we could make the world into a better place, and it's what we should be doing and what we could be doing, because we don't have anything better to do. And that's what the book is about. And that's the end of 12 Rules for Life. Thank you.
Well, we've overrun joyously, and normally I would have sort of cut the talk and done something so we can have questions, but I really didn't think it was appropriate. This evening's talk was absolutely luminous and inspiring. But so I'm going to do one question only, and I'm going to leave Jordan to actually decide what's the question he's going to ask. So I'm going to take 3 from the audience. I'm going to read out 3 that have come from the live stream. One from the live stream is, how do you challenge the identity politics of today? The second is a more personal one, is where do you fall short yourself in these 12 rules, and is it a constant adjustment? And now let me take 3 questions from the audience, and I'll leave Jordan to then decide which is the last question that he wants to ask. So, first hand there.
First of all, it's an honor to be at your lecture, and the question is, I wanted to ask, like, for example, some people, like for example Stefan Molyneux, who interviewed you, puts, I think, tremendous attention to admitting faults of parents and admitting the harm that was done when getting better and working through adversive childhood experience. And I wanted to ask you about that and what you think about that.
And then if we take the young lady just here.
Sorry. My question is about chapter 9, about being humble and listening to what your enemies are saying and criticizing you. I'm a kind of person who kind of speak my thoughts, so I speak them to my friends and see how they bounce at them. I noticed that there's always a group of my friends who always criticize what I'm saying and not even try to understand where I'm coming from. And I've always wondered how to deal with that. I mean, I want to listen to what they're saying, but they're not understanding they're not trying to listen to what I'm saying. So what would you do in that situation?
I'm going to answer that very briefly. There's a line in the New Testament that's relevant to that. Do not cast pearls before swine. And what that means is that if people are not listening to you, stop talking to them. And that is the best piece of advice that I can give you. And what happens is that if you stop talking to people who aren't listening to you and start watching them instead, they will tell you what they're up to. But so if you have things to say, say them, but you find people that will listen. Talk to them. The ones who aren't listening, pull back. Because you're devaluing what you have to say by offering it to an audience that does nothing but reject it. And that's a good guideline to life in general. So, pull back. Yeah.
And our last question is gentleman over there with in blue.
Thank you, Dr. Peterson. It brought a smile to my face when you mentioned the work of John Taylor Gatto, and I just wanted to know what you think the relationship is between the classic trivium and the Holy Trinity, and if there is, how has that changed over time?
I'm going to leave you to answer one question only.
Okay.
And then...
Okay.
And,
well, look,
and then you're going to be back on stage dedicating.
Yes, okay. I think I'm going to answer, where do you fall short in these 12 rules? Is it a constant adjustment? You know, like I wrote these rules. Why did I write these rules? Well, you know, and especially when I said, well, you should try to improve yourself instead of trying to set the world straight, or instead of worrying about what other people are doing wrong. You might say, well, that's a healthy thing. But the thing is that I wasn't.
Thank you. Yep.
I was writing that for me as much as for anyone else, and I mean I really mean that sincerely. You know, I had an opportunity to spend somewhere around 5 years meditating on how you should conduct yourself so that your life is what it could be. And like, I'm in the group of people that I'm advising. You know what I mean? It's like all of these things are very difficult to stand up straight, to remember that, and to treat yourself like you're someone worthwhile, and to make friends with people who are good for you. And and to tell the truth, or at least not to lie. I mean, these are all ideals, right? And especially taken as a whole, they constitute a kind of ideal, and you never attain the ideal. And not only that, it recedes as you approach it, right? Because you straighten yourself out. You think, well, I've got it now, and you think, no, wait a minute, there's more to go. There's still more to go, and then you get that much farther along the line. You think, oh, yeah, I thought this was the end of the road. It's like, no, there's plenty of imperfections left to iron out. And so it is a constant adjustment, but there's something about that that's also positive, because you might say that it's not so much that there isn't such a thing as a good person. It's that our idea of what constitutes good isn't right. Because a good person is someone who's trying to get better. And no matter how good you are, there's better that you can get, but the real good